Censorship in media has through the years changed drastically in many different ways. Things have become either more censored or less censored, depending on the situation. Society has changed its perspective on censorship in many different ways. We have either come to appreciate censorship for what it is. It has allowed control over certain things that make sure that we're not exposed to things that we shouldn't be exposed to, while also at the same time limiting us in many ways, as we've seen in recent news cases, where limitations can oftentimes skew our perspective on social issues, social norms, and anything relating to our society. Let's start off by talking about censorship in the film industry. Censorship in the film industry has been highly debated throughout the years, with censorship oftentimes differing from country to country. Here in America, we've experienced censorship in many ways. If you watch movies from back in the day, movies oftentimes refrain from showing explicit images of sexual relationships, as well as refraining from using words that we would at times deem vulgar. Now, however, with the freedom of expression, we are able to watch videos, movies, and anything of the like that we choose to watch. So now, movies where people may be saying words like the F word can easily get away with it without having an issue, because socially that's become a norm and we don't have a problem with it. However, if the movie were to portray a visual image of, let's say, someone being mistreated or harassed, we might not look too fondly upon it. And although it is our reality, we can't control who views the movie, so oftentimes we have to censor it for the general public. Things that trigger or can cause any emotional distress are oftentimes avoided in the film for the sake of social success among the general public. This can be both a business move and a social move. Artists are oftentimes seen using this as a way to make a statement. Whether it be a political statement or a social statement, they oftentimes use censorship as a way to control the content that they're providing. With artists like Guillermo del Toro, for example, a very well-known and famous filmmaker, he is oftentimes having to deal with issues of censorship by his producers and others behind him, as films cannot be publicly released with certain visual and graphic images that he typically tends to use. If you've seen any of Guillermo del Toro's early work, he uses a lot of graphic violence and graphic images, and this can oftentimes be a little too harsh for the general public. In his first movie, Mimic, he had to deal with Harvey Weinstein, who was oftentimes trying to control what he would put in front of the camera. And smaller instances, like in Hellboy 2, where he has his characters perform an intimate act in a very subtle way by holding hands, we are not necessarily shown what he truly intended, which was for them to have a sexual relationship. This was discussed earlier in the year when he came to UNLV for a Barrick lecture series.
Now, when we move into TV censorship, it's separated between TV shows and news shows. With news shows, when it comes to a minor, you have to protect that person's privacy, which means that when a minor commits a crime, his identity isn't given out in order to protect him from future harm. That future harm can ruin their reputation when they try to get into colleges or try to get into certain job positions that look into your history. But if the minor is charged as an adult, then that protected privacy is no longer valid. Now, also in news, they avoid graphic details in order to not offend the readers or viewers, which means that when they talk about a murder or a killing, they try not to tell the details of how brutal the victim was hurt, just so that the viewers don't get as uncomfortable, but they just want to raise the awareness. Now, when it comes to government information, the government looks over news a lot to make sure that information that they don't want to come out isn't coming out, because they don't want to let Americans as well as others from different countries learn too much on a given subject that pertains to government intelligence. They only want to tell us what they want us to know, not the entire story. Now, moving on to TV show censorship, it has changed drastically over the last decade. The FCC wasn't changed that much. but the rules of obscenity and language and sexual content are still valid, but what is considered the norm has changed. So many foul words are now normal, and they're heard among all types of shows, as well as sexual content and the sexual scenes are also normal in shows now. The reason for this is that the FCC only regulates channels that are airwaved, which means that they are free to watch by anyone that has a TV. So those free TV channels, those news channels that you automatically get when you have a TV, those are still heavily regulated by the FCC, which is why you'll notice they don't have a lot of that foul language in them because it's still regulated. But channels that are on cable TV, which is the cable TV that we pay for, like the Cox, the Dish, the DirecTV, we pay for that. Therefore, they're not regulated by the FCC. And up until the last 6 years, even cable TV just follows the same conduct that the FCC had, just because that's how the norm was. But now, since the last 6 years, they have changed that code of conduct that channels like ABC and CBS and NBC have. Now that has changed, and there is a new round to television where free expression is greatly gratified, whereas in the past decades, it was very frowned upon to show things such as gay relations or foul certain languages. Now, all foul language hasn't been approved, but many of the foul language that you use on a daily basis is heard on TV. There are still a few words that cable TV still hasn't touched, which I doubt that they will, just because of how bad those words are. But overall, sexual content has risen. They don't actually show, body parts, but it's very suggestive as what's going on, and that, I think, is continuing to progress. And I doubt the FCC will ever intervene with cable TV, just because of the fact that we as consumers do pay for that TV channel, which means that we can see whatever we want, and if we don't like what those TV shows show, then we won't pay for that channel.
Music censorship refers to the practice of editing music works for various reasons, but nowadays it's mostly used for bleeping out foul languages on TV and on radios. Artists say that their art shouldn't be censored because it's their way of self-expression. The main thing to think about when talking about censorship in music is freedom of speech, because when artists' music is censored, their message doesn't reach their listeners as fully. In 2007, MIA's hit single Paper Planes was censored by MTV and Late Night with Dave Letterman because it had gunshots in the track. The song itself is a response to the U.S. government not giving her a Visa card in 2006. In the future, censorship in music is only going to increase more because artists are going to say more and more foul languages and things that are going to be more offensive to the government and to other people. People argue that censorship in music should exist because parents don't want their kids to listen to racist comments, sexual references, and foul languages. These censorships are protecting the innocence of a child, some say, while others argue that we do not need censorship because artists choose music to express themselves, and censorship doesn't allow them to do that.
Social media censorship, it aids in controlling of undesirable content, and that is shown on television or even on the internet. It is not confined to just electronic media, such as news channels and social media sites or traditional mediums like print and radio. It includes the internet. Media censorship can stop porn or any sexually explicit content that is on the network. It can control the natures of advertisements, such as censoring the kind of products or services being promoted and the nature of the advertisements. Many ads on television, print, and online are harmful for kids as well as for adults. From fake products to tall claims, people are misled into believing what is evidently not true. The censorship can also improve security and the protection of sensitive information. It can also influence opinion and keep facts straightened. Unfortunately, it violates the freedom of expression. It is debatable as to what one can say or cause by what one says in the name of freedom of expression. It can lead to the banning of the broadcast. It can lead to government-funded and controlled broadcasts. And it further insulates society and makes people indifferent. The government can censor what social media regulations. Let's take Facebook, for example. We live in a media and communication saturated world. Social media platforms dominate today's information ecosystem. More than 60% of Americans get their news from Facebook or Twitter. Social media content has increasingly affected people's choices and views at times. Studies show that the internet freedom around the world has declined in 2016, and many people are being punished for the use of social media. Globally, 27% of users live in countries where people have been arrested for publishing, sharing, or merely liking content on even Facebook. It's not just social networking sites where users are at risk. Internet messages are also targeted. Let's take the WhatsApp app, which has a lot of restrictions, with 12 out of 65 countries blocking the entire service and features. Censorship of images has also increased. It's not only the direct censorship that affects the internet freedom. Some areas are free access internet phone providers, and they are restricted of their use. There has been an increase in legal changes to monitor people's online communication as well. Government basically wants to protect citizens from terrorist activity. Law enforcement argue that they need access to information to prevent terrorist attacks. Luckily, here in the United States, we have so much internet freedom.